Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss our latest breakdowns and analyses here on Worldline Analysis. Everyone thought Canada would quietly accept losing its auto plants to America. Everyone was wrong. October 25th, 2025. While headlines focused on Trump walking away from trade talks over a TV ad, something far more consequential was happening behind the scenes. The Canadian government, led by Mark Carney, sent a message to Detroit automakers that would cost them hundreds of millions. If you abandon Canadian workers, you lose access to the Canadian market. The statement wasn't fiery. It was technical, methodical, almost painfully specific. Ottawa announced limits on the number of duty-free vehicles Stellantis and General Motors could import from the U.S. into Canada. No dramatic press conference, no angry tweets, just a policy adjustment that completely shifted the economics of abandoning Canadian production. For months, Stellantis and GM believed they could play both sides. Move manufacturing south to avoid Trump's tariffs, yet continue selling freely in Canada. They took billions in Canadian subsidies for EV projects, then backed out when Trump offered sweeter terms. This time, they miscalculated. As Stellantis executives celebrated a $13 billion U.S. expansion and GM quietly shifted south, Carney's team was preparing a precise counter, not retaliation, but strategy. Consequences that would appear later in quarterly reports and tense boardroom meetings. If you believe actions have consequences, even for multinational corporations used to playing countries off each other, hit that like button. Because what Canada just did will force every automaker in North America to rethink whether pleasing Trump is worth losing access to the world's 10th largest economy. To understand why Ottawa's response matters, we have to understand what Stellantis and GM did to Canadian workers, and why this policy shift is more than justified. Before we continue, a quick note. If you want to see how federal automotive policies shape local communities, check out our sister channel, The Local Lens. They cover Canadian political stories at the municipal level, how factory closures ripple through schools, small businesses, and local economies. You'll find their link in the comments. Their work connects national policy to neighborhood impact. Now let's rewind. In 2022, Stellantis struck agreements with the federal and provincial governments billions in taxpayer funding for EV production in exchange for maintaining Canadian jobs. Specifically, the Brampton assembly plant was set to be retooled for the new Jeep Compass, 3,000 unionized jobs, and a future in advanced manufacturing. Then came February 2025. Trump announced a 25% tariff on vehicles built outside the U.S. Stellantis paused retooling in Brampton, calling it temporary. 8 weeks, maybe 10. Weeks turned into months. By summer, workers were checking updates daily, waiting for callbacks that never arrived. Then, October 15, 2025, Stellantis announced a $13 billion U.S. investment. Brampton's Jeep Compass production was permanently relocated to Belvedere, Illinois. 3,000 Canadians received automated phone calls. Your jobs aren't coming back. Imagine working at Brampton Assembly for 15 years. You've built a life, bought a house, raised a family, and one automated message ends it all. Not because of your work, but because trade policy in another country shifted overnight. For those who remember when Oshawa was Canada's motor city and Windsor's economy ran on car production, this felt like déjà vu. Another hollowing out by distant boardrooms. But this time, Ottawa didn't accept it. Ottawa prepared consequences. General Motors followed the same playbook. Its CAMI assembly in Ingersoll sat idle for months. Oshawa cut a production shift scheduled for early 2026. Ford's Oakville facility delayed production plans. Each time, the same pattern: promises made when government support was needed, promises broken when U.S. politics shifted. Industry Minister Melanie Joly had already warned Stellantis. Breaking commitments would be treated as defaulting on agreements. But talk alone doesn't change corporate behavior. Policy does. Here's what Canada actually did, and you know why it matters. Before October 25th, Stellantis and GM enjoyed exemptions from Canada's 25% retaliatory tariffs on US-made vehicles. Those exemptions allowed them to import thousands of cars duty-free, saving, honestly, hundreds of millions. Now Ottawa reduced those exemptions. Fewer cars can enter tariff-free. Anything beyond that quota pays the full 25%. Canada just made it expensive for companies that abandon Canadian workers to profit from Canadian consumers. The math is brutal. Canada is the largest export market for US automakers after America itself. Last year, Canadians bought over $50 billion worth of vehicles, a market no car maker can afford to lose or pay heavy tariffs to access. Tomorrow, when you're in line at Tim Hortons, remember this. The person beside you might work for a supplier once tied to Brampton Assembly. Or they might be one of those 3,000 workers now facing mortgage payments without a paycheck. Canada's message is clear. We won't let companies that betrayed Canadian workers enjoy easy profits from Canadian customers. Meanwhile, look at the alternatives. Windsor's Nexstar battery plant, a $5 billion project, hit its 2,500 job goal early. Ontario's unemployment held at 5.6%, even after Stellantis' pullout. Canadian parts exports to the EU climbed 18% as Stellantis expanded in the US. Public opinion shifted too. A recent poll found 67% of Canadians would boycott companies that moved operations to the US. That's not a niche protest. That's a national consensus. If those numbers show you Canada isn't just reacting, but redefining its industrial policy, leave a like, because the long-term consequences for other automakers are just beginning. The signal to the rest of the industry is unmistakable. Tesla, which never committed to Canadian manufacturing, is losing market share as buyers choose brands that invest locally. Toyota, Honda, and Ford, companies that kept production in Canada, are seeing loyalty rise. This is economic democracy in motion. Policy aligned with public will, consumers voting with their wallets, and labor and industry uniting behind build it here or lose access here. That's power corporations can't ignore. Ironically, Stellantis' move south to avoid tariffs cost it more than staying ever would have. Losses of $2.3 billion in early 2025, US plants running at half capacity, 900 American layoffs, and now 25% tariffs to reach the Canadian market they once served easily. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called it clearly. Trump's corporate pressure was extortion, and without pushback, we'll lose it all. But this isn't emotional retaliation, it's calculated leverage. Speaking the one language corporations understand, profit and loss. Critics call this protectionism, but honestly that argument misses some key facts. First, Stellantis and GM weren't exactly operating in a free market. They were responding to Trump's politically motivated tariffs, which were already violating established trade rules. So, responding with Canadian policy isn't protectionism. It's actually just defending against someone else's. Second, Canada doesn't owe any company guaranteed access. These firms signed contracts, took billions in aid, and when they broke those commitments, they forfeited the benefits. Third, this is really about sovereignty. For decades, Canada assumed that deeper US integration was always a good thing. But that illusion ended when Trump showed that American trade policy can flip overnight. Carney put it pretty bluntly. The long era of ever closer economic ties is over. That's not hostility. That's just strategy. When your top trading partner becomes unpredictable, you diversify. And when corporations try to exploit that instability, you make it costly. The numbers actually prove it works. Since implementing new policies, things like Buy Canadian, defense reinvestment, and tariff quotas, industrial capacity hasn't shrunk, it's evolving. Parts exports to Europe are up 18%. Battery jobs in Windsor are ahead of schedule. Ontario's unemployment is steady. These aren't signs of protectionist decline. They're actually proof of strategic success. For those who remember NAFTA's promises, free trade lifts all boats, this is a real moment of reckoning. That theory assumed fair play. But when one side weaponizes trade, the whole theory collapses. Canada is teaching a masterclass in adaptation, using leverage, not loyalty, as the foundation of trade. Flavio Volpe from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association summed it up really well. Canadians no longer want to be just a resource supplier. They want to build and innovate right here. That mindset is what's defining Canada's new economic identity. Not just raw materials, but advanced manufacturing. Not dependence, but independence. In the coming months, Stellantis has a big decision to make. Pay 25% tariffs or renegotiate and restore Canadian production. GM is facing similar choices. Every automaker in North America is now recalculating. For Brampton's workers, the big question is, will the plant reopen? Carney says Stellantis has offered alternative models, but that's going to depend on whether they value market access over short-term politics. One thing is certain, the age of consequence-free betrayal is over. Companies can't just take taxpayer support, break promises, and expect business as usual. That's the expensive lesson Detroit is learning right now. Subscribe if you want deeper analysis on how Canada is reshaping North American trade beyond Trump's chaos, because this Stellantis showdown is really just the beginning. Carney isn't chasing headlines. He's building an economy where prosperity doesn't depend on American politics, where investing in Canada isn't optional, it's essential, where workers aren't just disposable variables in corporate equations. Doug Ford and Mark Carney rarely agree, but on this, they're totally aligned. Canada builds, or Canada blocks. Taking subsidies and producing elsewhere is no longer on the table. This is what being Canadian in 2025 means: strategic, clear-eyed, unapologetic about defending workers. Stellantis thought they could play both sides. They're discovering that Canada doesn't play. Canada calculates. And right now, that calculation shows betrayal costs more than loyalty ever did. The auto industry will adjust. Some will invest in Canada, others will pay the tariff price, but none will forget this moment. Break promises to Canadian workers, and Ottawa will make you pay. Not with outrage, but with policy that hits your bottom line. Detroit assumed Canada was too polite to fight back. They're learning that quiet resolve can cut deeper than any speech. And a 25% tariff, precisely applied, speaks louder than any press conference ever could.